All right, so first things first, you want to make sure that you start with a nice, level, sturdy surface to put the car up onto. So typically what Bullrider has you do is either get the setup blocks, which are like a cylinder, or you can cut pieces of wood. I just found that putting a 2x4 on its side, which is 1.5 inches tall, is way more stable when you're trying to set the car up. So I set the car on a 2x4 in the back on its side and the front as well. So first thing you want to do is take your tail cone off so you have access to everything. And then we're going to go ahead and disconnect the top of all the shocks. Looks like we've got some damage on that one. So traditionally, you would either cut a piece of wood or use the cylinders that they sell and wedge them between the axle and the frame here to hold the right height. But you'd imagine when you're adjusting the rear axle and moving it forward and back and up and down that they frequently fall out and then everything drops and you got to put everything back together again. So what we've done was made these stands, and the stands are tapered here so they'll cradle the axle and then stand flat on the table instead of floating between the frame and the axle itself. So we just lift the axle up, rest it in place on each side, and you're good to go. And they won't fall out like the cylinders or a small block of wood would. You also want to remove your hood. Some of them are 2 pieces. Some is one whole giant piece that goes from the bottom to the top. This will let you have access to everything down here that you need. Now the front has even more play than the back would. It's very loose. So putting a block under here or a cylinder to hold this up in place while you square and set your car up, they tend to fall out a lot. So we have these 2-piece blocks here that you just fit together, and it rests on the axle itself and the frame to hold it in place. And then these also, you can turn them on their base, because who really has a perfectly straight axle anymore? It won't always line up the same spot. So now you can kind of just fine tune it by aligning the top and the bottom separate from each other. So now you want to take your 1/2 inch and loosen the jam nuts on your panhard bar to start. Now you'll put a level on the outside of your bearing carrier here, also known as the bird cage. And you want that to be 2 inches off of the frame. This one's spot on, but in order to adjust it, you would just turn your panhard bar to move the bird cage out or in. Now to set the front axle position, you're going to break loose the lock nuts on your panhard bar. Now take your tape measure against the frame rail and measure on an angle to the center of the panhard bar bolt, 12 3/4 for pavement or 13 inches for dirt. Once you have that set, you want to go ahead and tighten the jam nuts on your panhard bar. Now we have to what's called time the rear bird cages. So you'll want to break loose your jam nuts, all 4 on the top and bottom rods. And then you can use a tool like this. Place it against both heims here, or at least on this one, the mounts for the heims, and make sure that your bird cage is level on the left rear side. Now to adjust this, you would just turn each one of these radius rods until you're level. Now that your left rear bird cage has been timed, it's time to do the right one, no pun intended. We're going to take our tool. We're going to make sure that our bird cage is level, 90 degrees for dirt. For asphalt, they do recommend that you do a 1/16 of an inch lead on the top. So you'd want your top 1/16 of an inch forward from the bottom. Leave all your jam nuts unlocked at this point. You're going to take a Sharpie and mark the top center on each side, all 4 of your rods. That way, when you're adjusting the squaring of the axle, you turn these both simultaneously, equal amounts, and your bird cages will stay timed as you move the axle forward and backwards. So now there's 2 ways to square your rear axle. I prefer using the tool because it's much faster. You can set a level behind the frame rail and use a tape measure and measure equal distance on both sides. But basically, we're just gonna put this guy in here, goes against the axle and against the frame in the back and lays on your frame rail here. Once your axle touches here and this squaring tool is touching the back of your frame, that side is set. And then we want to go ahead and do the same thing to the next side. In order to make the adjustments, you're going to turn both of your radius rods equal amounts to move the axle forward or backwards. Once that's done, you want to make sure that you check both sides a few times as you make adjustments, because sometimes when you pull this side back, the other will move forward, etc., just to make sure that you're perfectly square in the back. Once that's done, you can go ahead and lock all your jam nuts and all your rear radius rods, and we're done with the back for now. Now we have to set our caster on our front right. You want to make sure your shock is out of the way, not hanging up on anything holding the axle in any weird position or anything like that. There's various different ways to do this. I prefer to use a digital angle finder because it's quicker, but you could use a caster tool as well. You're going to loosen all your jam nuts on these front 2 radius rods. I'm going to go ahead and zero out my angle finder, and then we're going to snap it to the spindle. You can see I'm at 4.5 degrees of layback. Now, layback means you can kind of see it here that the top of your spindle is laid back slightly more than your bottom. And to adjust that, you adjust your top and bottom rods until you get where you need to be angle-wise. They do recommend a layback of 3 degrees for pavement and a layback of 5 degrees for dirt. And that's, again, a starting point. You may do better with more or less layback. It depends on the driver, the track, etc. But that would be your base starting point. When you have your caster where you want it, you want to go ahead and mark the top center of both of these radius rods. That way, when we go to set the wheelbase, we're going to be adjusting the right front first. You would turn both of these simultaneously, and that way you don't lose your caster angle as you adjust the length of the wheelbase. So now to measure our wheelbase, you're going to want to do this on a part that you're touching bare axle, not a spacer, because that's going to offset your measurement. So we're going to put our right angle here right against the bare axle itself. We're going to grab our tape measure. We're going to have our tape measure touch the middle of your spindle here. Now, with keeping the tape measure on the middle of the spindle up front, you're going to want 47.5 inches back at the front of the axle here for a medium and large car. For a small car, you want 44.5. Now, if you have to adjust the wheelbase to get the measurement you need, you're going to want to go ahead and turn your top and bottom radius rods equal amounts on your right front to push or pull back the front axle to where it needs to be. We want to leave these jam nuts unlocked, though, at this point, because we're going to make wheelbase adjustments to the left side, and that can sometimes pull this one in or out of alignment slightly. So you want to just leave these unlocked so you can check it and make adjustments as needed after doing the left side. Then we're going to take our angle, and you want to put it against the bare axle again. I just kind of put it against the lip here, just so I don't have to take the hub and spacers off when I do this. Now, on the left side of your axle, there is no adjustment to your caster. It's just locked in and set by whatever the right side is set to. So we're just going to do the wheelbase on this side. We're going to loosen up your jam nuts on this radius rod right here. Get your tape against the center of your spindle here. Get your measurement. Make sure you're at the same length on the left side as the right side. Now, something to note is you can run lead on your right side if you do better with that, or depending on your track conditions, your driver, that sort of thing. This is just a bare base setup for getting the car squared and set up, the first time, or when you're resetting it and want to start making changes over from the beginning again. To adjust your wheelbase on the left side, you're only going to want to spin this rod right here. You don't want to move your back, just the front. If you move the back, and then you're pushing your rear axle out of square. If you've needed to make changes to the left side, we're just going to go ahead and check the right again. That way we know if this side has moved at all, and if it has, we're going to want to go ahead and make an adjustment. I'm good on this one. If you do make adjustments here, just go back and check your left side once more, just to make sure that didn't push that side out of alignment. Then you should be good to go from that part. Once our wheelbase is set, you want to go ahead and lock down all of your lock nuts on both sides of the radius rods. By both sides, I mean the left and right side of the car. We're now going to go ahead and set the camber. There's different ways to do this. Some people have camber plates that you bolt here that you can measure with using, like a digital angle finder or things like that. Bullrider recommends putting your wheels and tires on, setting your air pressure, and then putting an angle on the face of the wheel and using a tape measure to measure your camber. Our wheels get smashed up pretty bad and sometimes, slightly bent. I prefer not to run a bent wheel, but I don't find my measurement there is as accurate as I'd like it to be. So I prefer, my way of doing it is using our alignment bars. So I got to go ahead and take the hubs off. So now the way I do this is I take my setup blocks out of here. And I'm going to reconnect my shocks on both sides and then put the car up on the toe adjustment bars. So you're going to want to move that block underneath if it's in the way. And set your spindles here onto your toe bars. So I do this a little differently. I go ahead and set the toe before setting my camber. So you want to make sure that these tabs are in the 11 and 1 o'clock position on your steering shaft. And then you're going to want to break loose your jam nuts on your tie rods. So we're going to want to adjust our tie rods left and right until your spindle drops into this squaring tool. Once you have both sides set, you want to make sure that when you pick the car up, your spindle goes in and out of this tool easily without any resistance. If there's a resistance, you may be running lead or reverse lead on one side of the car. So you want it to be able to drop in and come back out freely without bringing the tool with it. If you do run lead on your right side, it will make it a little snug and the tool will come with it. That's okay. That's if you are running lead. But for a perfectly square alignment, you want to make sure that these go in and out freely. So this is how I set my camber. I go ahead and I zero out my angle finder on the table, and then I get it nice and level on my spindle here. And I use that to find my camber angle. I go ahead and I adjust the camber using these screws on either side of your kingpin. This will push the kingpin in or out to set your camber angle. Once you have that done on your right side, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the left. I'm going to just zero this out of my table to be safe. And we'll go ahead and do the same process on this side using the set screws on either side of your kingpin to set your camber. Now that that is all done and everything's square and set, we're going to go ahead and put our shocks back on the car, put your body panels back on, and you're going to want to go ahead and put your wheels and tires on, and you can start getting to set up your scaling.